Edgar Quero is off to a terrible start, and it's trending toward him being the young player who regresses this season.
You are Locked On White Sox, your daily Chicago White Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, I'm Todd Welter. Welcome to Locked On White Sox, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. On today's show, I'll get to this week's Way Back Wednesday segment, going over some of the coldest games the White Sox have played in. That comes after looking at the need to re-examine how the bullpen is deployed. But first, let's talk about the tough start Edgar Quero is off to and the hope he can turn things around to avoid being a key piece who regresses. And I bounce back and forth between which has been the bigger recent problem. The offense, the starting pitching, or the bullpen just struggling to protect leads. And then I saw Edgar Quero's reflection on his terrible start to the season and thought, he's trending towards being the regression player of the young core that came out of the 2025 season. Because remember, the biggest goal of the season is to get internal improvement from guys like Quero and Colson Montgomery and Chase Maedroth and Miguel Vargas. And at the very least, just stay at stagnation. Because what those guys accomplished last season was enough to at least be raised floor players, solid players, guys that can be complementary at their floor. So if they stay there, that's okay. But what you really want is improvement. You want Edgar Quero to be a guy who can hit for contact and a little bit of power. But regression is unavoidable for some players. And someone is bound to take a step back. We've seen this through a couple of White Sox rebuilds. We saw it with last decade's core. Guys like Eloy Jimenez regressed. Part of it was because of injuries, but part of it was he just could no longer put the ball in the air. But the key for Quero now is, can he meet the moment and get out of this early season slump? And honestly, can the offense do that for that matter? Because the Orioles have exposed the Sox inability to come through with runners in scoring position and basically just struggle to score runs. The White Sox currently have the worst run differential before today's series finale with Baltimore. It's at -27. Chicago is currently 24th in runs scored with 38. They are in the bottom 5 in the league in terms of average, on-base percentage, slugging percentage, OPS, and WRC+. And they have the 3rd worst strikeout percentage. That's bad, folks. Real bad. And right now, no player is a bigger example of that than Quero. He's got a 148, 233, 148 slash line with a WRC+ of 18. That's an eyesore. That's a rough watch. That's like Andrew Vaughn April bad. His strikeout percentage is at 25.8%. And remember, he finished with a 17.6 percentage last year. He wasn't exactly a guy that was fanning a lot. Now, there are others that are struggling too. I don't want to single out Quero, but for example, like when you look at the eye test or even just how things are being produced, Colson Montgomery, his average is obviously below 220, but he has 8 hits, 2 of them being home runs, and he does have a higher BABIP. I mean, that's the other issue. Quero is struggling to put the ball even in play. And when Colson is making contact at the plate, his WRC+ is at least still at 105. So he's 5 points above average in terms of as an overall hitter. Munetaka Murakami obviously is striking out like we feared. But he has 4 home runs, and his WRC+ is still at 140. Lenyn Sosa's numbers are obviously not good either. But his playing time has been irregular to start the season. It's kind of hard for him to get into a rhythm. And he's picked up a few hits recently, at least when they matter. I mean, Quero is struggling still when it comes to hitting with runners in scoring position. And that was one room for growth I think he could make this year, is hit better with runners in scoring position, especially with 2 outs, because last season he was not good at it. The early returns, still not good at it. Now, Andrew Benintendi is still just awful. I mean, think about it. He struck out while getting hit by a pitch. Gets hit by a pitch, still strikes out because he was swinging. And that negates getting on base. But we know he's an albatross around this organization's neck with that terrible contract. And he's not a vital part of the team's future. So that's why it's not even really worth discussing Andrew Benintendi. Except for if he ever plays left field again, which is going to have to happen. It's going to be so hard to watch with Austin Hayes out, but it's just not really worth getting bent out of shape because we're just running out the clock with him. Quero could be a vital part of this team's future, and he is having a rough go outside of, he did have a brief 3-game period where he had 4 hits, but that's it. It's just been 3 games out of this early sample size. He has 3 walks to 8 strikeouts to start the year. Now, that is a trend toward being concerned. We're concerned, dude. And I say concerned because this is a guy who could be working on his swing, because he did work in the offseason to try to get his swing to be more geared towards power. It was well documented in ESPN. I know I did a bonus episode on it. That he went to one of those famed hitting labs to kind of work on, can he start driving the ball better? And if you look at his baseball savant data, he is squaring up the ball well, and he's getting good exit velos when he does hit the ball. It's just he's not generating consistent bat speed. He's not barreling the ball up, and he's not getting at a launch angle to obviously drive the ball. That seems to be a problem. So to me, that's a guy still working through some things. And it's not like Quero is sitting there being happy. He's not making excuses. This is what he recently said. This is MLB.com's White Sox beat reporter Scott Merkin. He tweeted this at Scott Merkin. Quero, quote, "Everybody knows I suck right now. I'm not afraid to say it, but at the same time, I'm working every day, trying to work hard, trying to come back. I'm feeling pretty good at the plate." And SoxMachine.com's Jim Margulis had a little bit of extra of the quote, but he's saying what he needs to say. He's being open and upfront. He's not at least saying, well, I know I've hit in the past. He's not giving us Andrew Vaughn logic out there. And last year, I think he actually had a good approach at the plate. His approach was make contact because he realized, hey, there's a lot more I have to master here at the big league level when it comes to actually being a catcher. I got to handle a pitching staff. I got to, work out my defensive backstop. I got to throw out base runners. I got to prepare, the pitching staff for what they're facing. I got to call a game. I got to do all these things. So the last thing I need to be worried about too is trying to crush home runs. Why don't I just make contact? And I think that worked. And maybe he needs to get back to that approach and just try to hit for more power maybe as the season goes on. Now, the whole point of this segment is someone from this young core is likely going to regress. And right now, it could be Quero. It's trending that way. It's a concern. But let's see if he can fight back to avoid it becoming a reality. Well, when it comes to the bullpen, yesterday's 4-2 loss served as an example of manager Will Venable needing to rethink his bullpen strategy that I want to discuss next.
Hey, this is Jeff Carr from Locked On Reds, and when it comes to our futures, we all have great ideas when it comes to our job, when it comes to our house, when it comes to our vehicles, all that great stuff. But honestly, when it comes to securing that future, I don't know what I don't know. And when me and my wife sat down to figure out the life insurance thing, Ethos made everything simple. Everything's online, you have a quick and easy application process, and you find out exactly what you need for coverage all in one spot. Ethos makes everything so convenient when it comes to learning about your own life insurance, because insurance is something that is far beyond batting average or on-base percentage. It's way out in left field for me. Ethos made it all easy. Take just 10 minutes and get covered today with life insurance through Ethos. Get your free quote at ethos.com/lockedonmlb. That's ethos.com/lockedonmlb. www.fanduel.com/LockedOnMLB. Application times may vary and rates may vary.
Thank you for making Locked On White Sox your first listen of the day, and thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. Baseball is finally back, and to celebrate, I'm giving you a full month of the Everydayer Club for free. That's right, free. Go to lockedonwhitesox.supercast.com and use code FINALLY, and you'll unlock every episode ad-free. You're going to get access to our private listener group chat, so tap the link in the show notes and use code FINALLY to claim your month free. Welcome back to Locked On White Sox. I'm your host, Todd Welter. This is now my third season podcasting here. Been covering the team well before then, and I've also covered Major League Baseball for outlets such as the Associated Press. And manager Will Venable's overall bullpen strategy is a good idea. Okay? The downside of him wanting to use his best relievers for the toughest outs as they present themselves is you got to then have at least 6 strong, high-leverage relievers. You got to have a deep bullpen. You might have to sometimes go 7. And despite overhauling the bullpen, the eye test shows the White Sox still don't have it. I mean, that 4-2 defeat was a classic example of that. Because, we can point to the starters are not eating enough innings. That's clear during these first couple of games. But if the offense isn't scoring enough runs to break open games, but doing just enough to have leads or be within striking distance, because that's what's happened when it comes to needing your bullpen in high leverage situations, or even medium. The offense from time to time, while it is sputtering right now, has done just enough to give the Sox some leads. We've only had a few games where they've been completely obviously blown out. Opening day, although, hey, they were up 1-0. The Saturday game against the Brewers, that debacle in Miami against the Marlins where Sandy Alcantara threw a Maddox. But otherwise, they had that lead in that series finale against Milwaukee. They were up in that second game against Miami before that terrible defensive play between Tristan Peters and Luis Angel Acuna just unraveled everything. Sweep the Jays, where the pitching was good, but it's been exposed again. The Brewers exposed it, the Marlins exposed it, and the Orioles have exposed it, that they just don't have the strong enough arms or talented enough arms to be able to implement what Will Venable does. Because, just like yesterday, after Venable used 2 of his better bullpen arms to get those vital outs in innings 4 through 6, he was left with less than ideal options to continue to the need to get big outs in Jordan Hicks and Chris Murphy. That was a trend last season. It's one of the reasons why they lost so many close games. And those are just 2 arms that are either inconsistent, Hicks, or clearly do not have the stuff to be a consistent force in those situations, Murphy. The strategy does work better if you do have all your high leverage arms available too. Grant Taylor was not available. And yes, the strategy works if your starters last longer. And that does need to be fixed. But you've seen the opener be able to then allow Burke to eat up innings, Fetty to eat up more innings. So you have had a little bit of success. So, just something has to be done, because this traditional, hey, as these outs present themselves, it works. But again, if the out presents itself in 6 and 7 and 8 and 9, you still have to have arms, and you either have to have good multi-inning relievers, and Jordan Hicks has really been inconsistent in that role, or you got to have 4 to 6 guys. You got to have up to 6 guys, because again, even if a starter gets to the 6th inning, you might still have tight issues in the 7th and 8th. And you might still need to rely on multiple relievers in those situations. And right now, the bullpen is taxed. They have a league high 59 innings pitched heading into the series finale against the Orioles. The bullpen ranks 24th in bullpen ERA with 5.80, 25th in FIP at 5.20. In terms of high leverage ERA, the bullpen ranks 27th. So all that work seems to be for nothing, because that was the focus in the offseason, was to get better on the margins, get a more talented arms. Granted, they had to do it on the cheap, but they still, I thought relatively they did some, Chris Getz made some decent acquisitions. And again, you don't want to be spending a ton of the limited resources you have on the bullpen. Although the exception I was willing to make was this year, because if you sign these guys to 1-year deals, you can flip them at the trade deadline. I will always keep advocating for that. But when I saw Jordan Hicks stumble in the 8th inning, I thought David Sandlin better be worth taking on this guy. David Sandlin better go on to win a Cy Young if I got to watch Jordan Hicks blow leads. If I got to watch Jordan Hicks pitch do okay in the 7th, but then shaky in the 8th. If I have to have this nervous pit in my stomach, David Sandlin better become an ace, because again, that's the whole reason why they took on Hicks' salary, was to get this better prospect, this better pitching guy who had a high ERA at AAA and is hurt right now. So he better recover. He better go on to, bigger and better things, because I'm not confident in Jordan Hicks. I mean, he's got a 25% walk percentage, and he only has a 16.6 or 16.7 K percentage. He still is having these command issues despite throwing hard. Although he should be a bit better when it comes to high leverage situations. His FIP in high leverage is 3.65, but the ERA is 9. But since Sean Newcomb had to be used to cover that final out in the 4th, because Tanner Murray could not make an infield defensive play, and the Sox were still up 2-0, so they needed that. They needed that out to preserve the lead. And then the 5th was covered by Newcomb, so he covers an inning and a third. Jordan Leisure covers the 6th, who he seems to be pitching like he did at the end of the season after a brief getting shelled. I mean, I think we have to get in for a ride on Leisure. I think that's just what it's going to be. He's going to have a couple of outings where he just gives up some home runs, gets shelled, and then he's going to have 6 or 7 really strong outings. I think that's the ride we're in for. But I'd rather take that gamble, because he's still young, still cheap, and the White Sox didn't trade him to get a better prospect. But there was Hicks being called on, gets to the 7th, but he can't protect the lead in the 8th. And remember, he's supposed to be a multi-inning guy. And then you got to go then with Chris Murphy, because you've already used Sean Newcomb, who's better in high leverage. Murphy comes on, game's tied 2-2. Got a man on second, and he's got to face Gunnar Henderson. And there was a pit in my stomach. I don't know about you. I mean, the moment I saw that matchup, I had the feeling that this can't be good. This is not going to turn out right. And sure enough, 2-run go-ahead homer. Now, we can blame the lack of money, but it also might just be you need to develop a bullpen that can actually pull off the strategy. It is a good strategy over the traditional roles, as you don't want to be waiting for outs that may never come. However, if the talent isn't strong in the bullpen to make it work, you may have to go back to the traditional roles. Although it sounds like the club is willing to try different solutions. Elijah Evans of Just Baseball is reporting prospect Tyler Schweitzer is getting called up. They've already made other roster moves in the bullpen to see if they can get some guys to make the strategy happen. But if they can't find the right combo, Will may have to go back to the traditional roles. Like Sean Newcomb is your traditional setup guy to get, to be able to get those outs later in the game. Well, yesterday's game's start time was moved up to a day game due to the cold weather. And I thought, why not go over some frigid games the Sox have played in this Way Back Wednesday segment that I'll discuss next. Whether it's a big-time matchup, seeing an MVP player, a breakout rookie, or a division race that goes down to the wire, there's nothing like being in the ballpark for it. The only problem Getting tickets can feel like a grind. Long queues, surprise fees, prices jumping at checkout, and that's where there's Game Time. The Game Time app gives fans the advantage with constant innovation. It's how you unlock amazing tickets and experiences in just a few taps, and it's so simple to use. The Game Time guarantee means you get 100% authentic tickets delivered on time and at the best price. And here's the best part. Fees are included in the price you see. So what you see is what you pay, period. And I recently used Game Time to purchase tickets to when Chicago took on Milwaukee last weekend. The seat view feature was huge. I got to see the panoramic view from my exact seat before I clicked purchase, and I got field level seats at a great price. And I took my nephew, and he thought I spent a ton. And when I told him the deal I got, he was impressed. The best part is that the app was easy to use. 2 taps, and it was done. Clicked purchase. I had great seats. No stress, no hidden fees, just great seats in minutes. And that's what makes it so easy to decide last minute to hit up a game. Take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app. Create an account and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Welcome back to Locked On White Sox, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and now the #1 sports podcast network. Shout out to all the everydayers. I appreciate your loyalty. Baseball is finally back, and to celebrate, I'm giving you a full month of the Everydayer Club for free. Go to lockedonwhitesox.supercast.com and use code FINALLY. You'll unlock every episode ad-free, get access to our private listener group chat. Tap the link in the show notes and use code FINALLY to claim your free month. All right, so hopefully when eventual controlling owner Justin Ishbia settles on a site for the team's new ballpark and he contracts out an architect, he requests and is willing to finance a ballpark with a retractable roof. Now, there are 3 reasons you want a retractable roof. 1, you guarantee a game will always be played. You know that when you buy a ticket, you're going to get a baseball game. But 2, you also protect your players from those muscle strains that can happen in cold weather. I mean, you saw what happened to Austin Hayes. These guys can stretch out as much as they want. I know we have a ton of scrutiny towards the White Sox medical staff, but a lot of these pulled muscles that they've had, these injuries, have usually happened in April. I mean, remember 2024? Yoan Moncada, April, cold weather game. Eloy Jimenez, April, cold weather game. Luis Robert Jr., April, cold weather game. It's hard to stay loose in frigid temperatures. The third is you also give your offense a chance to not go through these early season slumps because they do have to navigate hitting in the cold. Playing baseball in the cold is not fun. Especially the stingers on the bats. You're sitting around freezing at the time because it's not like you're active in football. Bad starts will happen, but you prefer that it not be aided by bad weather. And then you can optimally put together a roster where you don't have to be calculating the wind, for example, all the time. And the Sox have been dealing with some chilly temperatures since they've started this homestand. Yesterday's start time had to be moved up to a day game because of the forecasted frigid temps. And it got me thinking, the Sox have actually played in some colder games. And why not review some of them on this week's Way Back Wednesday segment? The Sox Nerd, he's a social media presence. And I found back on his WordPress blog back in 2023, some of the coldest games in recent memory, and he listed out some of them. So on April 4th, 2007, it was 31 degrees when the Sox took on Cleveland. And actually 26,377 fans showed up. It was one of the coldest home games since 1963. Although the Sox lost to Cleveland 12-5. April 7th, 2007, 3 days later, 31 degrees, 33,278 showed up for a mid-Saturday afternoon game. And the Sox actually won 3-0, beat Detroit. And what was it? He has Javier Vasquez relievers, Andy Cisco, Mike McDougal, Matt Thornton, and Bobby Jenks combined for a 3-hitter. And that tied the record for 3 days prior to the lowest temperature. So, yeah, it was the same cold snap in 2007. They played 3 games in very frigid temperatures. April 5th, 2003, 32 degrees. Soxner called it the 35th Street freeze-out. But thankfully, Mark Buehrle pitched that game, so it wasn't going to take that long. The Sox beat the Tigers 7-0 in a 2-hour and 60-minute game. 16,972 fans braved that cold. April 9th, 2016, 32 degrees. The Sox pinned a loss on Brian Shaw in a 7-3 triumph over Cleveland before 20,192 fans on Saturday afternoon. That's what he writes. And then 32 degrees, April 7th, 2018. Miguel Cabrera had 3 RBIs in dooming the Sox to a 7-1 loss in a Saturday matinee before 16,625 fans. Now, he did have a note, because I think he was just going over a recent memory about Roger Clemens' 7-0 domination of the Sox in 1997 in front of hardly any fans. 746 fans showed up to watch the White Sox get absolutely destroyed. It was 34 degrees. But if memory serves me correctly, because I remember watching that game, it was on WGN. That's like when the Sox had a few games on WGN. And I remember sitting and watching the game in my room, nice and toasty. And if I remember correctly, though, even in Johnsburg, Illinois, the wind chill was brutal. Maglia Ordonez looked like he wanted to be anywhere else but Reed Field. I think it wasn't Mags. I'm trying to think who was the player that was like bundled up. I mean, it was just one of those games where those guys did not look like they wanted to be there. The only guy that looked like he wanted to be there was Roger Clemens. He pitched wonderfully, and 746 fans showed up. And I remember Cubs fans using that as a reason to make fun of us Sox fans and the Sox ability to draw. But it was supposed to be a night game. They moved it to a day game because of the weather. So that's the other reason why maybe only 742 fans showed up. And it's an April game. You're never going to draw well on April, May, and September getaway games because of school. Okay, that does happen. Cubs can always say, well, we draw. Okay, you draw, as the old saying goes, of the 10 to 15% of the world that doesn't work. As the stereotype goes. I can shoot back with stereotypes. Anyways, I also, when I was researching this, Tom Skilling answered a fan question about a 40-degree game played at Old Comiskey, and this is how Skilling recounted it. It was an unseasonably and unreasonably cold that June 9th, 1972. The White Sox game was a night game that was played in upper 40-degree weather accompanied by strong north winds gusting as high as 40 miles per hour and scattered showers. The weather was more typical of opening day than for early June. However, the record books don't tell the real story since the high for that date is listed as 71 degrees, a reading recorded shortly after midnight. A strong cold front then passed and temperatures crashed, falling into the upper 40s by late afternoon, setting the weather stage for your memorably chilly Sox game. And I remember my first Sox game that I ever went to was Sox-Yankees. It was, I think, mid-April, and it snowed. It was at Old Comiskey, and it started to snow. So the Sox have had to navigate some of that brutal early April weather. So that's why, Justin, begging you, retractable roof. Well, that wraps up this edition of Locked On White Sox. I'll be back tomorrow with the weekly Turned Out Differently Thursday segment. Make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox or wherever you get your audio podcasts, as this show is available on places such as Apple or Spotify. You can email me with your questions and comments to lockedonwhitesox@gmail.com. You can follow the show on Twitter at Locked On Sox. You can follow me at Todd J. Dub. Also, the show has a TikTok page at Locked On Sox, Locked On White Sox. And if you never miss an episode, the Everyday Air Club is built for you. Get Locked On White Sox ad-free, plus members-only Discord access, and so much more. Head to lockedonwhitesox.supercast.com to join the club. And if you've already signed up, tell your friends to join. I'd really appreciate it. For those of you on video, we send you to the first ever 24/7 National Locked On Podcast Network YouTube channel. On audio for your second listen, go check out Locked On MLB. Have a great day. Talk to you later.